Sometimes the people the world rejects are the ones with the most to give. In a frozen frontier town, a father trades his daughter to a mountain man for winter supplies because no one else would have her. The townsfolk laugh and whisper cruel words. They say she's too heavy, too plain, too quiet for any man to want. They say he'll leave her in the snow before morning comes. But they're wrong about both of them. She has a gift that could save lives when the cold turns deadly. He sees something in her that no one else bothered to notice. When a blizzard traps them and danger comes down from the mountains, will their arrangement stay a cold transaction or become something real? Before we continue, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story resonates with you, subscribe, because tomorrow brings something special. Pine Ridge was the kind of settlement where everyone knew your business before you did yourself. Nestled in a valley where the Rocky Mountains rose like ancient sentinels. The town consisted of 23 buildings, a trading post, a saloon, and a church that doubled as a schoolhouse on weekdays. In the winter of 1867, when the snow came early and deep, Pine Ridge became an island cut off from the rest of the world until spring's thaw. Eliza May Hartwell had lived her entire 26 years in this town, and for the last 3 of those years, she had felt every minute of her isolation. Her mother had died in the spring of 1864, taking with her the only warmth Eliza had ever known. Rachel Hartwell had been half Cherokee, a woman of quiet dignity who taught her daughter the ways of healing herbs and plant medicine passed down through generations. The townsfolk had tolerated Rachel because she'd married Samuel Hartwell, a white man, and because her remedies had saved more than a few lives over the years. But Eliza had inherited her mother's copper skin tone and dark hair, along with her full figure and gentle disposition. Without her mother's protection and reputation, she became an easy target for the cruelty that seemed to come so naturally to people with small minds and smaller hearts. She stood now at the window of the small cabin she shared with her father, watching the snow fall in thick curtains that erased the world beyond their fence. The cabin felt smaller every day, the walls closing in as her father's coughing grew worse and the food supplies dwindled to almost nothing. The shelves that once held her mother's carefully preserved vegetables and dried meat now stood mostly bare, save for a few jars of beans and a small sack of cornmeal. Samuel Hartwell sat by the fire, wrapped in 2 blankets, his face gaunt and grey. Once a strong man who'd worked the trapline with the best of them, he'd been weakened by a lung fever that never quite left him after the winter of '65. He couldn't work anymore, couldn't provide, and the debt he owed to the Pritchard trading post had grown to the point where even Eliza knew they were living on borrowed time. "Stop your staring out that window," Samuel said, his voice rough as gravel. "Won't make the snow stop falling." Eliza turned from the window, pulling her shawl tighter around her shoulders. The cabin was cold despite the fire. They were burning wood slowly, rationing it like everything else. "I was just thinking about Mother's garden," she said softly, "how she'd make it bloom even in the worst years." Samuel's face softened for a moment, memory warming what illness had chilled. "She had a gift, your mother did. You got that same gift, Eliza. Don't think I haven't noticed the plants you keep growing in those pots, or the teas you make that ease my cough. Not enough of a gift to matter much," Eliza said, moving to the small collection of clay pots on the windowsill where she cultivated what herbs she could manage indoors. Sage, feverfew, a struggling mint plant. Her mother had known hundreds of plants and their uses. Eliza knew perhaps 50, and only because she'd paid careful attention in those last years before the fever took her mother away. The truth was simpler and harder than that. Her gift didn't matter because no one in Pine Ridge wanted healing from the fat half-breed girl who lived in the falling-down cabin at the edge of town. That's what she'd heard Mrs. Pritchard call her once when Eliza had gone to the trading post to buy flour on credit. The woman had said it just loud enough for Eliza to hear, not quite loud enough to be confronted directly. "You're more than you know," Samuel said, and then the coughing took him again, racking his thin frame until Eliza rushed to his side with a cup of the pine needle tea she'd brewed that morning. He drank it gratefully, catching his breath. When he looked up at her, his eyes were wet, and she couldn't tell if it was from the coughing or something else. "I've failed you, girl. Failed to protect you the way your mother would have wanted. You haven't failed anyone, Papa." But even as she said it, she knew it wasn't quite true. He'd failed to stand up for her when the town turned cruel. He'd failed to defend her when Mrs. Pritchard refused to extend more credit unless Eliza would work it off by scrubbing floors in the trading post where everyone could laugh at her struggling bulk on her hands and knees. He'd failed in the small ways that added up over time to make her feel like she truly was as worthless as the town believed. But he was her father, and he was dying by inches in front of her eyes, and she couldn't bring herself to add to his burden with the truth. A knock at the door startled them both. Visitors were rare, especially in weather like this. Samuel gestured for Eliza to answer it, and she found Sarah Chen standing on the porch, snow dusting her dark hair and practical wool coat. Sarah was the only person in Pine Ridge who'd remained kind to Eliza after her mother died, perhaps because Sarah's own family had faced prejudice. When they'd arrived from San Francisco 5 years before, "I can't stay," Sarah said quickly, glancing over her shoulder as if worried she'd been followed. "I just wanted to tell you that Mrs. Pritchard was talking at the post today. She's going to demand full payment of your father's debt by week's end, or she'll petition to take your cabin." The words landed like stones in Eliza's stomach. "She can't do that." "She can, if the territorial judge agrees, and Judge Morrison does whatever benefits the Pritchards." Sarah pressed a small wrapped bundle into Eliza's hands. "It's just some biscuits and dried venison. I'm sorry it's not more. Thomas is worried that if I'm seen helping you too much, it'll affect his standing at the mill." Thomas was Sarah's husband, a good man but cautious. Eliza understood. Everyone in Pine Ridge was cautious about associating with her now. Being kind to Eliza Hartwell was the kind of thing that could make your life harder in a small town. "Thank you," Eliza said, meaning it. "Tell Thomas I understand." After Sarah left, Eliza brought the food inside and set it on the table. It would give them perhaps 3 more days. Then what? Samuel stared into the fire, his jaw working like he was chewing on difficult words. Finally, he spoke. "There's a man who lives up in the high country, Jacob Thorne. You've heard the talk about him." Everyone had heard about Jacob Thorne, the mountain man who lived alone in a cabin somewhere above the timberline, who came to town twice a year to trade furs and buy supplies. He was tall and hard-faced, with eyes that seemed to look straight through a person. Some said he'd been a soldier, others claimed he'd killed men, though no one could say for certain. He kept to himself and wanted nothing to do with the town's business. What about him? Eliza asked, though something cold was already creeping up her spine. "He's a man alone. He might be willing to take on a wife in exchange for helping us through the winter." The words hung in the air between them like the snow hung outside, inevitable and suffocating. "You want to trade me?" Eliza said flatly. "I want to save your life," Samuel said, and now the tears were definitely there, running down his weathered cheeks. "You think I don't know what will happen to you when I'm gone? You'll have nothing. No home, no prospects, no protection. At least with Thorne, you'd have a roof over your head. You'd have a chance. A chance at what? You don't even know if he'd agree. You don't know what kind of man he is." "I know he's the only option we have left." Samuel's voice broke. "I've tried everything else, Eliza. I've begged, I've borrowed, I've sold everything worth selling. This is all I have left to bargain with, and I'm praying to God it's enough to keep you alive." Eliza wanted to rage at him. She wanted to tell him that being traded like a sack of grain was worse than starving. But when she looked at her father's desperate face, at the way his hands shook with fever and weakness, she found she couldn't say any of it. "When will you ask him?" she said instead. "Tomorrow, if the weather breaks enough for me to make the climb." That night, Eliza lay in her narrow bed and listened to her father's labored breathing from the other room. She thought about her mother, who had been beautiful despite what the town said, who had carried herself with quiet pride even when people whispered. What would Rachel Hartwell say about her daughter being bartered to a stranger? But Eliza knew the answer. Her mother had been practical above all else. She'd married Samuel because he offered stability and kindness in a world that offered precious little of either to a Cherokee woman alone. Perhaps this Jacob Thorne would offer the same. Perhaps he would be cruel. Either way, it seemed her choice had already been made by circumstance and desperation. She reached under her bed and pulled out the wooden box where she kept her mother's things. The faded tintype photograph showed Rachel at 20, standing beside a seated Samuel, her hand on his shoulder. Her mother's face was serious, as was the fashion, but Eliza had always imagined she could see a hint of warmth in those dark eyes. Beneath the photograph were her mother's journal of plant remedies, written in careful script, and the beaded medicine bag Rachel had made in the traditional way of her people. If she was going to be traded to a mountain man, at least she would bring her mother's knowledge with her. It might be the only thing of value she truly possessed. The weather did break the next morning, though the sky remained heavy with the promise of more snow to come. Samuel rose before dawn, moving with the careful deliberation of a man who knew his body might betray him at any moment. Eliza made him eat what little breakfast they had and packed dried meat and hardtack for his journey, though both of them knew the food was precious. "You don't have to do this," she said one last time as he wrapped himself in his warmest coat. "Yes, I do." He kissed her forehead, something he hadn't done since she was a child. "If he agrees, be ready to leave quickly. Men like Thorne don't waste time on sentimentality." She watched him disappear into the grey morning, following the trail that led up toward the high country. The climb would take him most of the day, and she spent those hours in a strange state of suspension, unable to focus on any task for more than a few minutes. She mended a tear in her only other dress. She organized her mother's remedies. She tried to read from the Bible, but found the words sliding past her eyes without meaning. By the time the sun began its early winter descent, she'd convinced herself that Samuel wouldn't return until morning, if at all. The journey might have been too much for his weakened lungs. He might have gotten lost in the vast wilderness above the tree line. Jacob Thorne might have turned him away, or worse. But as the last light faded, she heard the sound of a wagon on the frozen road. She moved to the window and saw not just her father, but a larger figure driving a team of 2 sturdy mules. Even in the dimness, she could make out Jacob Thorne's broad shoulders and the set of his jaw beneath a dark beard. Her heart hammered against her ribs. He'd agreed. Her father had actually done it. Samuel came in first, his face exhausted but relieved. Behind him, Jacob Thorne had to duck slightly to clear the doorframe. He was taller than she'd remembered from the few times she'd seen him in town, perhaps 6 feet and a few inches more. His coat was made of elk hide, well-crafted and practical, and his boots were worn but solid. He removed his hat, revealing dark hair touched with grey at the temples, and his eyes swept the cabin in a single assessing glance before settling on Eliza. She forced herself to meet his gaze. His eyes were grey like the winter sky, and they revealed nothing of his thoughts. "Miss Hartwell," he said. His voice was deep and measured, the tone of a man accustomed to silence. "Your father has explained the situation. I've agreed to his proposal on certain terms." "What terms?" Eliza asked, surprised by the steadiness of her own voice. "You'll come to my cabin as my wife. I'll provide your father with enough supplies to see him through the winter and funds to settle his debt with the trading post. In exchange, you'll keep house and help with the work as you're able. I won't expect more than you're willing to give, and I won't mistreat you. You have my word on that." It was a businessman's speech, practical and without romance. Somehow, that made it easier to bear than if he'd tried to pretend this was anything other than a transaction. "And if I don't wish to go?" she had to ask, even though they all knew she had no real choice. "Then I'll leave, and you and your father will face whatever comes next." He didn't say it, cruelly, just factually. But I think you're a woman who understands necessity when she sees it. He was right, of course. She did understand. When would we leave? Tonight? There's another storm coming, and I want to be back before it hits. So soon. She'd thought she might have a day, maybe two, to prepare herself. But mountain weather didn't negotiate, and neither, it seemed, did Jacob Thorne. I'll need time to pack my things. 1/2 an hour, he said. I'll load the supplies for your father while you get ready. He went back outside, leaving Eliza alone with Samuel. Her father gripped her shoulders, his hands trembling. He's a hard man, but I think he's fair. He promised me he'd treat you with respect, and I believe him. I wouldn't send you with him if I didn't. I know, Papa. She did know. Samuel Hartwell had many failings, but he loved his daughter in his way. This was the only protection he had left to offer her. She packed quickly, years of frontier living having taught her to travel light. Her clothes fit into a single canvas bag. Her mother's medicine bag, journal and remedies went into a wooden box that had belonged to Rachel. The tintype photograph she wrapped carefully in a piece of cloth and placed at the top of the box where she could reach it easily. She took her mother's worn Bible and a few other small items that carried memory more than practical value. When she emerged from her room, Jacob was back inside, standing by the fire with her father. Between them on the table was an array of supplies that must have represented a small fortune: flour, salt, coffee, dried beans, bacon, even a bottle of whiskey. Beside these was a leather pouch that clinked with the sound of coins. That should more than cover the debt, Jacob said to Samuel. There's extra for a doctor if you need one, and for food until spring. Samuel's eyes were wet again. I don't know how to thank you. No thanks needed. This is fair trade. Jacob turned to Eliza. You ready? She nodded, not trusting her voice. She hugged her father, feeling how thin he'd become beneath his clothes, wondering if she'd see him alive again come spring. Take care of yourself, Papa. Use the remedies I left on the shelf. The red willow bark tea for the cough, twice a day. I will. You be good to this man, Eliza. He's giving you a chance at a life. She didn't know what to say to that, so she said nothing. Jacob picked up her belongings as if they weighed nothing and headed for the door. She followed him into the cold night, leaving the only home she'd ever known. The wagon was loaded with furs and supplies. Jacob had arranged a space for her in the back, with blankets and a bearskin to keep her warm. He helped her up with a gentle hand that surprised her, then climbed up to the driver's seat and took the reins. As they pulled away, Eliza looked back to see her father standing in the doorway, illuminated by the firelight, his hand raised in farewell. Then they rounded a bend, and he was gone, and she was alone with a stranger who was now, by frontier law and mutual agreement, her husband. They rode in silence for a long time. The trail climbed steadily, winding through stands of pine and aspen that stood skeletal in the moonlight. The cold bit at her cheeks despite the bearskin, and the stars overhead were so bright and numerous they seemed close enough to touch. This was country she'd never traveled, wild and remote, and with every minute that passed she felt Pine Ridge falling further behind. Jacob drove with easy competence, guiding the mules along paths that were barely visible in the darkness. He knew this country, she realized. Knew it the way her mother had known which plants grew where and when to harvest them. This was his domain. After perhaps 2 hours of steady climbing, he spoke without turning around. There's water and dried meat in the pack beside you if you're hungry. Thank you. She wasn't hungry, but she appreciated the dissing consideration. How much further? Another 2 hours. We'll be there before midnight. Do you make this journey often? Twice a year to trade. Otherwise, I stay put. He paused, then added, You'll find it quiet up there. Some women can't abide the isolation. I'm accustomed to being alone, she said. Alone in a town is different from alone on a mountain. I suspect it is, but I imagine I'll learn to manage. She saw his shoulders shift slightly, and she wondered if he was surprised by her answer. Let him be surprised. She might be the woman no one in Pine Ridge wanted, the one her own father had traded away, but she wasn't going to arrive at Jacob Thorne's cabin as a frightened, weeping burden. The wind picked up as they climbed higher, carrying the scent of coming snow. Jacob urged the mules faster, and Eliza pulled the bearskin closer. The landscape had become more barren now, the trees smaller and more twisted by constant wind, the rocks jutting up like ancient bones through the snow. Then, as they crested a ridge, she saw it. A cabin nestled in a natural hollow, protected from the worst of the wind by a standing wall of rock. Smoke rose from the chimney, a sign that Jacob had banked the fire before he'd left. There was a barn nearby for the animals, and even in the darkness she could see that both structures were well built and maintained. Jacob drove the wagon to the barn first, tending the mules with practiced efficiency. Eliza climbed down on her own, not waiting for help, and he glanced at her with what might have been approval. Together they unloaded her belongings, and then he led her to the cabin. He opened the door and gestured for her to enter first. The interior was a single large room with a sleeping loft above. A stone fireplace dominated one wall, and Jacob moved immediately to build up the fire. There was a table, 2 chairs, shelves lined with books and supplies, and a bed in the corner covered with furs and quilts. One bed. Jacob saw where she was looking. He straightened from the fire and pulled a hand-carved walking stick from beside the hearth, offering it to her. "You'll have the bed," he said. "I'll sleep here by the fire until you decide otherwise. No pressure, no expectations. We both know what brought you here, and I'm not the kind of man who forces himself on a woman, arrangement or no arrangement." She took the walking stick, feeling the smooth wood beneath her fingers. It was beautifully made, the handle carved in the shape of a bird's head. The gift was simple but spoke of skill and consideration. "Thank you," she said, meaning it for more than just the stick. "There's stew in the pot if you're hungry, utensils and plates on the shelf. Make yourself at home as much as you're able. I know this isn't what you'd have chosen, but I'll do my best to make it bearable." With that, he went back out into the night to finish settling the animals, leaving Eliza alone in what was now, impossibly, her home. She set the walking stick carefully against the wall and looked around the cabin with new eyes. It was clean and orderly, the space of a man who lived deliberately. The books surprised her most. There were at least 20 of them, more than she'd expected a mountain man to own. She moved closer and read the spines. Shakespeare, Whitman, a volume of Greek philosophy, a treatise on natural history. Jacob Thorne, it seemed, was full of surprises. She was still standing there, trying to make sense of this strange new reality, when he came back inside, bringing the cold with him. He removed his coat and hung it on a peg by the door, then moved to the pot hanging over the fire. "You should eat something," he said. "It's been a long journey." So Eliza sat at the table while Jacob Thorne, her husband by transaction if not by choice, served her a bowl of venison stew that was surprisingly good. And as the fire crackled and the wind howled outside, she began the first night of her new life, wondering what dawn would bring. The morning after they first shared the bed, Eliza woke to find Jacob already up, but he'd left a cup of coffee warming by the fire for her. Small gestures like this had become their language, neither comfortable yet with declarations, but both finding ways to show care. A month had passed since she'd arrived on the mountain, and the cabin had truly become home. She knew which floorboards creaked and where the drafts came in. She'd reorganized the kitchen supplies to her liking, and Jacob had built her additional shelves for her growing collection of remedies and herbs. They'd settled into a partnership that felt both comfortable and charged with possibility. "I want to show you something," Jacob said after breakfast. "It's a bit of a walk, but worth it if you're willing." "I'm willing." They bundled into their warmest clothes and set out into the crisp winter morning. The sky was that particular shade of blue that only came on the coldest days, so bright it almost hurt to look at. Jakob led her east, following a trail that was barely visible beneath the snow. He moved with the easy confidence of a man who knew every stone and tree, and Eliza found herself watching him as much as the landscape. After nearly an hour of steady climbing, they crested a ridge, and Eliza gasped. Before them lay a natural amphitheater carved into the mountainside, and at its center, steam rose from a series of pools. Hot springs, their water so clear she could see every stone on the bottom. "I found these my first year up here," Jakob said. "Nobody knows about them but me. Now you." They descended carefully, and as they grew closer, Eliza could see plants growing around the pools that shouldn't have survived this high or this late in the season. The heat from the springs created a microclimate, a pocket of warmth in the frozen world. "Jakob, these plants." She knelt beside one of the pools, examining the vegetation with growing excitement. "Some of these are rare. My mother told me stories about hot springs where healing plants grew, but I never thought I'd see them." She spent the next hour cataloging what she found while Jakob watched with quiet amusement. There were mosses she could use for wound dressing, lichens with medicinal properties, even a few flowering plants that shouldn't have bloomed until spring. She filled the bag she'd brought with careful cuttings and samples, her mind already racing with the remedies she could prepare. "You're happy," Jakob observed as they sat beside one of the pools, eating the lunch they'd brought. "I am." Eliza looked at him, this man who'd given her so much more than she'd dared hope for. "Thank you for sharing this place with me. It's yours now, same as mine." He reached over and brushed a strand of hair from her face, the gesture tender. "Everything I have is yours, Eliza. I want you to know that." She leaned into his touch, and for a moment they simply looked at each other, the air between them heavy with unspoken feeling. Then Jakob stood, offering his hand to help her up. "We should head back before the temperature drops." They walked back more slowly than they'd come, comfortable in each other's presence. But as they approached the cabin, Jakob suddenly stopped, his body going tense. "Stay behind me," he said quietly. "What is it?" "Tracks. Someone's been here." He pointed to marks in the snow that circled the cabin, leading to the windows and door. "Recent, too." Within the last hour, Eliza's heart began to pound. They were miles from the nearest settlement, and visitors were virtually unheard of in deep winter. Jakob approached the cabin carefully, his hand on the knife at his belt. The door was still closed and latched from the outside as they'd left it, but the tracks told a story of someone examining the cabin thoroughly, looking in windows, testing the door. Inside, nothing had been disturbed, but the violation of their space was palpable. Jakob immediately checked his rifles and ammunition, his face grim. "We're not alone up here anymore. Who would be in these mountains in winter? Only two kinds of people, the desperate or the dangerous, sometimes both." He moved to the window, studying the tree line. "There are men who use these mountains to hide from the law. Outlaws, deserters, men running from something. I've seen their camps occasionally when I'm out trapping, but they've always kept their distance before. Why would they come here now? Could be they're low on supplies. Could be they saw you arrive and got curious. Could be something worse." Jakob turned to face her, his expression serious. "I need you to learn to use the rifle, not just for practice but for real. And we need to set up signals, ways to communicate if we're separated." The rest of the day was spent in preparation. Jakob taught Eliza emergency protocols, where to go if the cabin was compromised, how to make it to the hot springs and hide there if needed, what signs to leave if she had to run. He showed her how to load and fire the rifle quickly, how to aim in poor light, how to shoot to kill if she had no other choice. It should have frightened her, this sudden shift from peaceful domesticity to preparation for violence. And it did frighten her, but it also awakened something else. A determination to protect what they'd built, to fight for the life she was creating here. That evening, they sat closer than ever before, both keenly aware of the vulnerability of their isolation. Jakob had secured all the shutters and checked every possible entry point. He'd loaded both rifles and placed them within easy reach. "Tell me more about your past," Eliza said, needing the comfort of his voice. "You said you were a soldier. What kind?" Jacob was quiet for a long moment. "I was a U.S. Marshal before the war, then served as an officer during it. After, I went back to being a marshal. I was good at, too good maybe, made enemies. Is that why you're up here?" "Partly. Mostly I'm here because my wife and daughter died while I was away hunting a gang of outlaws. Cholera took them in less than a week. By the time I got home, they were already buried." His voice was steady but hollow, the words worn smooth by repetition. "I couldn't stay in that house, couldn't stay in that town, so I came west to these mountains and tried to forget everything." Eliza reached for his hand. "I'm sorry. I can't imagine that pain. I don't want you to imagine it. I don't want anyone to feel what I felt." He gripped her hand tightly. "But having you here, Eliza, it's made me remember that life can be more than just enduring. You've reminded me what it feels like to care about someone, to have something worth protecting. I feel the same way." The admission came easier than she expected. "I didn't think I'd ever feel at home anywhere, or with anyone. But I do here. With you." Jacob pulled her closer, and she went willingly, resting her head against his shoulder. "Whatever's out there, whoever was watching today, we'll face it together. I won't let anything happen to you." "And I won't let anything happen to you," she said, surprising herself with the fierceness in her voice. They sat that way late into the night, keeping watch together, two people who'd been alone, finding strength in their growing bond. The tracks in the snow were a reminder that danger existed beyond their cabin walls, but inside they were building something worth defending. When they finally lay down to sleep, Jacob kept one rifle beside the bed and his arm around Eliza. She felt his heart beating against her back, steady and strong, and knew that whatever came, they would face it as they faced everything else now, together. The signs of watching eyes continued over the next week. Traps disturbed, tracks that circled their property line, but never quite approached. Jacob's tension grew with each discovery, though he tried to hide it from Eliza. She saw it anyway, in the set of his shoulders and the way his hand constantly drifted to the knife at his belt. She began working on a quilt, cutting squares from Jacob's old clothes that were too worn to mend anymore. It gave her hands something to do during the long evenings when they sat by the fire, listening to every creak and crack outside. The fabric carried his scent, and working with it felt like weaving herself more deeply into his life, making something permanent from what had begun as temporary. "Tell me about Margaret," Eliza said one night as her needle moved through the cloth. "What was she like?" Jacob looked up from the harness he was mending, surprised by the question. "You want to know about my dead wife? I want to know about the woman you loved. She's part of who you are, Jacob. I'm not threatened by her memory." He set aside his work, considering. "She was small, barely came to my shoulder, had red hair that caught fire in the sunlight. She was fearless about everything except spiders." A smile ghosted across his face. She could outcook anyone in 3 counties and had the stubbornness of a mule when she set her mind to something. "How did you meet?" "I arrested her father for horse theft." Jacob's smile widened at the memory. "She came to the jail and argued with me for 2 hours about his innocence. Turned out she was right. He'd bought the horses legally, but the seller had stolen them. She made me investigate further, wouldn't leave me alone until I did. By the time I cleared her father's name, I was halfway in love with her." "She sounds wonderful." She was. So was Emma, our daughter. She had Margaret's red hair and my eyes. She was 5 when she died. Jacob's voice roughened. "She wanted to be a teacher. Used to line up her dolls and teach them to read from the Bible." Eliza set down her sewing and moved to sit beside him. "I'm sorry you lost them, but I'm grateful. They were part of your life. They made you who you are." Jacob looked at her with something like wonder. "How did you get so wise?" My mother, she used to say that grief was love with nowhere to go, and that the only way through it was to find new places for love to flow. Eliza took his hand. You don't have to stop loving them to care about me, Jakob. The heart isn't a finite space. He pulled her close then, holding her tightly. I do care about you, Eliza, more than I thought I could care about anyone again. You've brought something back to life in me that I thought was dead and buried. You've done the same for me. In Pine Ridge, I felt invisible. Worse than invisible. But you see me. You've always seen me, from the very first night. I see you, he confirmed, and what I see is a strong, capable, beautiful woman who deserves so much more than she's been given. You think I'm beautiful? The words caught in her throat. No one had ever called her beautiful. I think you're the most beautiful thing I've ever seen. Jakob cupped her face in his hands. And I'm done pretending this is just an arrangement of convenience. I'm done keeping my distance out of some misguided sense of honor. If you'll have me, Eliza, truly have me, then I'm yours. Her answer was a kiss, the first real kiss they'd shared. It was tender and tentative at first, then deepening as weeks of carefully maintained distance dissolved. When they finally drew apart, both were breathless. I'm yours, Eliza whispered. I think I have been since that first night when you gave me the bed and asked for nothing in return. That night, they became husband and wife, in truth, not just in name. And afterward, lying in Jakob's arms, Eliza felt a completeness she'd never experienced. This was what her mother had tried to explain, why Rachel had been willing to face the prejudice of Pine Ridge to be with Samuel. Love made you brave. Love made you whole. What are you thinking? Jakob asked, his fingers tracing lazy patterns on her shoulder. That I'm happier than I ever thought possible, that I'm grateful my father made that desperate climb to your cabin, that everything I lost led me here, to you. I was thinking the same thing, he pressed a kiss to her forehead, though I'm also thinking about those tracks we keep finding, about whoever's watching us. The mention of danger brought reality back into sharp focus. Do you think they mean us harm? I think anyone hiding in these mountains in winter is running from something, and desperate men are dangerous men. We need to stay vigilant. He paused. There's something I should tell you, something I haven't been entirely honest about. Eliza propped herself up on one elbow, looking at him. What is it? My full name is Jakob Thornton, not Thorn. I shortened it when I came up here because I wanted to disappear. I was known, you see. Known well enough that some men might have reason to seek me out for old grievances. What kind of grievances? The kind that come from putting dangerous men in prison or in the ground. I was good at my work as a marshal, Eliza. Very good. And I made enemies because of it. He met her eyes. I don't think those tracks are random. I think someone knows who I am, and they're deciding what to do about it. Fear flickered through her, but beneath it was something stronger. Then we'll be ready for them. Whatever comes, Jakob, we face it together. You taught me to shoot. You taught me to be strong. Now we use those lessons. You're remarkable, he said, pulling her close again. I just found you. I won't lose you to violence from my past. You won't lose me. Eliza said it with certainty, believing it with everything in her. We're stronger together than whatever threat is out there. They don't know what they're dealing with. No, Jakob agreed, a fierce pride in his voice. They really don't. They held each other as the night deepened, the fire crackling, the wind howling outside. Whatever storm was coming, they would weather it the way they weathered everything else. Together, bound by something that had started as a transaction and become, against all odds, genuine love. The storm came 3 days later, fierce and sudden. Snow fell so thick that Eliza could barely see the barn from the cabin window. Jakob had gone out to secure the animals, and she was preparing supper when she heard it. A pounding on the door. Desperate. Weak. Her hand went to the rifle beside the fireplace, just as Jakob had taught her. "Who's there?" "Help." The voice was barely audible over the wind. "Please, help me." She approached the door carefully, rifle ready. "Identify yourself." "Samuel. Samuel Hartwell, I'm Eliza's father." Her heart stopped. She threw open the door to find her father collapsed on the threshold, his coat soaked with blood and snow. "Papa!" She dragged him inside, her strength fueled by panic. He was shot, she realized, with horror. The wound was in his shoulder, still bleeding sluggishly. She grabbed blankets and her medicine bag, falling back on her training even as her mind reeled. Jakob burst through the door moments later, taking in the scene instantly. "What happened?" "He's been shot." Eliza's hands worked quickly, cutting away the bloody fabric. "Help me get him to the bed." Together they moved Samuel, and Eliza began working to save his life. She cleaned the wound with whiskey, relieved to find the bullet had passed through. She packed it with moss from her stores, the kind her mother had taught her would prevent infection, then bound it tightly. Samuel drifted in and out of consciousness, moaning with pain. Jakob heated water and brought clean cloths, following Eliza's instructions without question. For 2 hours they worked, until finally Samuel's breathing steadied and his color improved slightly. "He'll live," Eliza said, sagging with exhaustion. "But he's lost a lot of blood. He needs rest and time to heal." "What's he doing here?" Jakob asked quietly. "How did he even make it up the mountain in this condition?" As if hearing the question, Samuel's eyes fluttered open. "Eliza," he rasped, "had to warn you." She moved to his side, taking his hand. "Warn us about what, Papa? Who shot you?" "Mrs. Pritchard." Samuel coughed, wincing with pain. "Her husband. They found out about gold." "What gold?" Jakob asked, his voice sharp. "Near your land. There's a deposit. Been rumors about it for years. I did surveying work back in the day, recognized the signs in the rock formations when I came to your cabin that first time." Samuel's eyes filled with tears. "I was desperate for money. I sold the information. Told them where you lived, Jakob. I'm so sorry." Eliza felt the world tilt. "Papa, what did you do?" "I told them about Jakob Thorne, the mountain man who lives on land that might have gold underneath it. But Pritchard," he dug deeper, "found out who Jakob really is." Samuel tried to sit up but fell back with a groan. "He sold that information to someone else. A man named Clayton Rourke." The temperature in the cabin seemed to drop 20 degrees. Jacob's face went white, then hard as stone. "Clayton Rourke. You know him," Eliza said. It wasn't a question. "I know him." Jacob's voice was flat, emotionless. "He's the reason Margaret and Emma are dead." Samuel nodded weakly. "Pritchard showed me a wanted poster. For Jacob Thornton, U.S. Marshal. That's when I understood what I'd done. Rourke is coming here, Jacob. He's bringing his whole gang, at least 8 men. They're planning to take your land and kill you. It's not about gold. It's about revenge." "How long?" Jacob asked. "I left Pine Ridge 3 days ago, after Pritchard shot me for trying to back out. They'll have left by now. In this weather, maybe 4 or 5 days before they arrive." Samuel gripped Eliza's hand with desperate strength. "I had to warn you. I had to try to fix what I'd done. I'm sorry, daughter. I'm so sorry for all of it." Eliza looked at her father, this broken man who'd traded her away and then sold information that might get her killed. She should hate him. Part of her did. But he'd ridden through a blizzard with a bullet wound to warn them. And that had to count for something. "Rest now, Papa. We'll figure this out." Jacob had moved to the window, staring out into the storm. His whole body was rigid, and when he turned back, Eliza barely recognized him. This wasn't the gentle man who'd taught her to shoot and shared the hot springs with her. This was someone else. Someone harder, dangerous. "Tell me everything," she said quietly. "The truth this time. All of it." So Jacob told her. His real name was Jacob Thornton, and he'd been one of the most effective U.S. Marshals in the territory. He'd tracked and captured dozens of dangerous men, developing a reputation for being relentless and fair. Clayton Rourke had led a gang that robbed banks and killed anyone who got in their way. Jacob had been hunting them for months when he got word that his wife and daughter were sick. He'd rushed home, but he was too late. They died while he was still 2 days away. In his grief, he'd learned that Rourke's gang had been in the area when the cholera outbreak started. They'd been camping near the town's water supply. I could never prove they poisoned the water deliberately, but I believe it. They knew I was getting close, and they wanted to distract me. My family was collateral damage. Jacob's voice was hollow. I tracked them for another year after that, caught or killed most of them. But Rourke escaped, disappeared into the territories where I had no jurisdiction. I finally gave up, came here, tried to let it go. But he found you, Eliza said. Seems he did, and now he's coming to finish what we started. Jacob moved to a wooden chest in the corner and pulled out something wrapped in oilcloth. When he unwrapped it, Eliza saw a silver marshal's badge. I never thought I'd wear this again, Jacob said, staring at it. Thought that part of my life was done. But Rourke won't stop. Even if we run, he'll follow. He's that kind of man. Then we don't run, Eliza said, surprised by her own certainty. We fight. Eliza, there are 8 of them and 3 of us, 1 badly wounded. Those aren't good odds. Neither were the odds when you arrested all those dangerous men before. Neither were the odds when I survived 3 years alone in Pine Ridge after my mother died. She moved to stand beside him. You told me that endurance is a form of strength. Well, I've endured, and now I'm ready to fight for what's mine. This cabin, this life, you. I'm not giving any of it up without a battle. Jacob looked at her, really looked at her, and something shifted in his expression. You mean that? With everything I am. From the bed, Samuel spoke up weakly. I'll help however I can. It's my fault. There, coming, let me try to make it right. Jacob was silent for a long moment, thinking. Then he pinned the marshal's badge to his shirt. All right. If we're going to do this, we do it smart. Rourke is vicious, but not stupid. He'll expect me to be alone, maybe with Eliza. He won't expect us to be ready. What's your plan? Eliza asked. We use the terrain. We use preparation. We use the fact that Rourke underestimates everyone he faces. Jacob moved to the table, clearing it and beginning to sketch a rough map. This cabin is defensible, but we'll need to fortify it. Set traps around the perimeter, create fallback positions if we're overrun. I can help with that, Samuel said. Used to build defensive positions during the war. And I can prepare medical supplies, Eliza added, for treating wounds, ours and theirs if we capture any. Jacob nodded, his mind clearly racing through tactical considerations. We have maybe 4 days before they arrive. That's enough time if we work, constantly, and don't sleep much. But I need you both to understand something. He looked between Eliza and Samuel. Rourke and his men are killers. If we face them, people will die. Maybe all of us. Are you prepared for that? Eliza thought about the life she'd built here, the happiness she'd found, the love that had grown from a simple transaction into something profound. She thought about losing it all, about going back to being the rejected, invisible woman she'd been in Pine Ridge. I'd rather die fighting for this life than live without it, she said. Samuel nodded. I've got nothing left to lose except my daughter's forgiveness. If I can earn that by helping defend her, then I'll die content. Then we start now, Jacob said. Eliza, make a list of every medical supply we'll need. Samuel, once you're stronger, I'll need your help fortifying the cabin. We're going to turn this place into a fortress, and when Clayton Rourke arrives, he's going to learn that Jacob Thornton isn't the grief-broken man he thinks he is anymore. He looked at Eliza, and she saw the warrior he'd once been emerging from behind the gentle mountain man she'd come to love. I have something worth fighting for now, something worth protecting, and I won't lose it. Eliza moved to his side, taking his hand. You won't lose us. We're in this together, remember? Whatever comes. Whatever comes, Jakob agreed, and then he pulled her close, holding her as if memorizing the feel of her in his arms. Outside, the storm raged on, and somewhere out there, death was coming for them. But inside the cabin, 3 people who'd all been broken in different ways were coming together to forge something stronger than the sum of their parts. They would face what came, not as individuals, but as a family, bound by circumstance and strengthened by choice. And if Clayton Rourke thought he was riding into an easy victory, he was about to learn just how wrong he was. The transformation of the cabin began that very night. Despite the storm, despite Samuel's wounds, despite the exhaustion that pulled at them all, they worked. Jakob moved with a focused intensity Eliza had never seen before, the marshal emerging fully from the mountain man's quiet exterior. He started by creating a detailed map of the surrounding terrain, marking every approach to the cabin, every natural choke point, every place where the land itself could become a weapon. Rourke will scout before he attacks, Jakob explained as he worked. He'll look for weaknesses, for patterns in our movement. We need to give him false information, make him think we're less prepared than we are. Samuel, despite his injury, contributed from the bed where Eliza had confined him. Build a false defensive line here, he said, pointing to a spot on the map. Make it obvious. He'll plan to flank it, which will push him exactly where you want him. Eliza watched the 2 men work together, her father and her husband, united in purpose, despite Samuel's betrayal. She focused on her own preparations, taking inventory of every remedy, every bandage, every tool she might need if the worst happened. She prepared strong teas that would dull pain, poultices that would prevent infection, and tinctures that would give strength when exhaustion threatened. By dawn, the storm had passed, leaving the world buried in fresh snow. Jakob went out to begin the physical preparations, and Eliza was struck by the change in him. He moved like a predator now, economical and purposeful, his eyes constantly scanning the tree line for threats. The first day was spent creating defensive positions. Jakob dug shallow trenches at strategic points, covering them with branches and snow to make them invisible. He set snares and tripwires around the cabin's perimeter, the kind that would injure or slow attackers but look like ordinary trap lines. He reinforced the cabin's shutters with extra timber and created firing positions at each. Window. You're turning the mountain into a weapon, Samuel observed from his chair by the fire, where Eliza had finally allowed him to sit. The mountain is already a weapon. I'm just helping Rourke hurt himself on it. Jakob came inside to warm up and check his ammunition. How many men did Pritchard say Rourke was bringing? 8, including Rourke himself. Maybe more. 8 is bad odds, but not impossible. Jakob began cleaning and oiling his rifles. The terrain evens things out. They'll have to approach uphill through snow, in a place I know, and they don't. If we're smart and a little lucky, we can thin their numbers before they even reach the cabin. Eliza brought him coffee and food, noting the dark circles under his eyes. When did you last sleep? I'll sleep when this is over. But he took the food gratefully, eating as he continued to work. How's your shooting? We need you accurate at 50 yards, 100 if possible. I'll practice this afternoon. Good, because when this starts, there won't be time for hesitation. If you see one of Rourke's men, you shoot to kill. No warning shots, no trying to wound. These aren't men who will show you mercy. The words were harsh, but Eliza understood the necessity. I know. I'm ready. Jakob looked at her then, really looked at her, and his expression softened slightly. I never wanted you to have to be ready for something like this. You deserve a peaceful life, Eliza. You deserve better than having to fight off killers in the snow. What I deserve is the life I choose, she said firmly. And I choose this. I choose you. I choose fighting for what we've built here. She cupped his face in her hands. Don't carry guilt about this, Jakob. Your past isn't your fault, and neither is my father's betrayal. What matters is what we do now. He pulled her close, holding her tightly. "I love you," he said, the first time either of them had spoken the words aloud. "I should have said it before, but I'm saying it now. I love you, Eliza, and I will do everything in my power to keep you safe." "I love you too," she whispered against his chest. "And I'll do everything in my power to keep you safe. We protect each other." The second day brought more preparations. Jacob taught Eliza to reload quickly under pressure, to shoot from cover, to move between positions without exposing herself. He drilled her on the emergency plans, making her repeat them until she could recite them in her sleep. Where to go if the cabin was breached. How to signal if she needed help. What to do if Jacob was killed. "Don't say that," she protested at the last. "I have to say it. If I go down, you and Samuel need to know what to do. Take the horses and ride for Pine Ridge. Take the evidence in that chest." He pointed to a wooden box. "Documents that prove who I am and what Rourke has done. Give them to the territorial marshal. Don't try to be a hero. And if you're wounded but alive, then you patch me up, and we keep fighting." He smiled grimly. "I'm hard to kill, Eliza. Rourke's tried before." That evening, Samuel asked to speak with Eliza alone. Jacob went to check the perimeter, giving them privacy. Samuel looked older than he had just days before, the weight of his choices visible in every line of his face. "I don't expect you to forgive me," he said quietly. "I betrayed you twice, first by trading you away, then by giving information that put you in danger. I've been a poor father, Eliza, the worst kind." "You made desperate choices," Eliza said, sitting beside him. "Some of them were wrong. But you also rode through a blizzard with a bullet wound to warn us. That counts for something. Does it count for enough?" She was quiet for a moment, searching her heart. "I'm angry at you, Papa. I probably will be for a long time. But I also understand desperation. I understand making choices that feel impossible. And I know that you love me in your way, even if that love hasn't always looked like I needed it to. Your mother would be ashamed of me. My mother would be proud of what I've become despite everything." Eliza took his hand. "She'd be proud that I found strength and love in an impossible situation. And she'd probably tell you the same thing she always told me. Yesterday is gone, and all we can do is try to be better today." Samuel's eyes filled with tears. "I'll help you fight them, daughter. Whatever strength I have left, it's yours. I know. And when this is over, when we've survived this, we'll figure out what comes next. But Papa, I'm not coming back to Pine Ridge. This is my home now. Jacob is my family. You're welcome to visit, to be part of my life. But on these terms, not the old ones. I understand, and I'm grateful for even that much." He squeezed her hand. "I'll earn your trust back, Eliza, somehow." The third day brought signs that their time was running out. Jacob found fresh tracks a mile downslope, multiple sets heading toward the cabin, then veering away. "Scouts," he said grimly. "They're assessing the approach. We have maybe a day, possibly less." The final preparations took on desperate urgency. Jacob set more traps, created fallback positions, and prepared the cabin for siege. Eliza organized her medical supplies and ensured she had water and food ready. Samuel, moving carefully despite his injury, helped fortify the doors and windows. That last evening, as the sun set over the mountains, the three of them sat together around the fire. They'd done everything they could. The cabin was as defensible as it could be made. Their weapons were cleaned and loaded. Their plans were set. Now there was nothing to do but wait. "Tell me about your mother," Jacob said to Eliza, breaking the tense silence. What would she say about all this? Eliza smiled, thinking of Rachel. She'd say that courage isn't the absence of fear, it's choosing to do what's right despite the fear. She'd say that family isn't always the one you're born into, sometimes it's the one you choose. And she'd say that love is worth fighting for, worth dying for if it comes to that. "Wise woman," Jacob said softly. "She was. I wish you could have known her." "I feel like I do know her. I see her in you." In your strength, your grace, your refusal to be less than you are, despite how the world has treated you. Jacob reached over and took Eliza's hand. If we survive this, I want to build something lasting, not just this cabin, but a real home. Maybe a family, if you want that. I want that more than anything. Then we'll have it. We'll survive this, and we'll build a life together that's worth all the struggle it took to get here. As darkness fell, Jacob made one final circuit of the defenses. When he returned, his face was grim. They're out there. I saw firelight in the trees about 2 miles down. They'll come at dawn, when the light's at their backs and the cold makes us slow. Then we should rest. While we can, Eliza said, though she knew none of them would truly sleep. They divided the watch into shifts. Samuel took first watch despite his injury, insisting he was strong enough. Jacob and Eliza retreated to the bed, lying together fully clothed, weapons within reach. "Are you frightened?" Jacob asked quietly. "Terrified," Eliza admitted, "but also strangely calm. Like everything in my life has been leading to this moment. I know what you mean. I thought I'd left violence behind, but maybe some things follow us, no matter how far we run. Maybe the only way through is straight ahead. Then straight ahead we'll go." Eliza turned to face him in the darkness. "Whatever happens tomorrow, Jacob, I want you to know that these past weeks with you have been the happiest of my life. You saw me when no one else did. You made me feel valued and loved. That's a gift I'll carry forever, no matter what comes." "You gave me the same gift," Jacob said, his voice rough with emotion. "You brought me back to life, Eliza. You made me remember that there's more to living than just surviving. I'll spend whatever time we have left, whether it's 50 years or 5 hours, loving you with everything I have." They held each other in the darkness, finding comfort and strength in their connection. Outside, the temperature dropped and the stars wheeled overhead. And somewhere in the trees below, 8 dangerous men waited for dawn to bring death up the mountain. But inside the cabin, 3 people who'd been broken and betrayed were preparing to fight back. They were outnumbered and outgunned, but they had something Rourke and his men didn't. They had something worth protecting. They had love and family and the kind of determination that comes from having nothing left to lose and everything to fight for. When dawn came, Clayton Rourke would learn what happened when you threaten people who'd already survived the worst the world could throw at them. He'd learn that some mountains can't be climbed, some fights can't be won, and some people simply refuse to break, no matter how hard you push. The storm was coming. But they were ready. The desperate attack came an hour later, when the sun was high enough to create glare on the snow. Rourke and his 3 remaining men coordinated their assault, attacking from multiple directions simultaneously. Fire arrows arced through the air, aimed at the cabin's roof. "The roof!" Eliza shouted, but Jacob had already moved. He'd soaked hides in water the night before and draped them across the most vulnerable sections. The arrows stuck, but didn't ignite, smoke rising harmlessly. "Keep firing," Jacob commanded. "Don't let them get close enough to try again." The cabin filled with smoke and noise, the crack of rifles and the smell of gunpowder. Samuel took a bullet through the meat of his thigh, crying out in pain. Eliza wanted to go to him, but Jacob's voice cut through her panic. "He's alive! Keep your position!" She forced herself to focus, firing at the shapes moving through the trees. One of her shots found its mark, and a man stumbled, clutching his side. Not a kill shot, but enough to slow him down. The outlaws were getting closer despite their losses, using the terrain and covering fire to advance. "They're going to breach," Jacob said, his tone urgent. "Eliza, fall back to the bedroom. Barricade yourself in. Samuel, can you still shoot?" "I can shoot," Samuel said through gritted teeth, blood spreading across his leg. "Then hold the east side." "I'm going outside." "Jacob, no!" Eliza's protest was instinctive. "It's the only way. They're too close to the cabin. I need to engage them directly. Push them back." He grabbed his rifle and the brass compass he'd given Eliza weeks before. "If I don't come back, you know what to do. Use this to navigate to Pine Ridge. Don't look back." Before she could argue, he kissed her hard and fast, then slipped out the back door into the cold. Eliza moved to the window, her heart in her throat, watching Jakob move through the snow with deadly purpose. He used the terrain like he'd been born to it, appearing and disappearing behind rocks and trees, his shots precise and devastating. One of Rourke's men went down with a bullet through his chest. Another tried to flank Jakob and walked into a trap they'd set days before, a concealed pit that sent him tumbling. That left only Rourke and one other man. Inside the cabin, Samuel's position was compromised. The remaining outlaw had worked his way around to the east side, using the chaos of Jakob's sortie as cover. He burst through a weakened section of shutters, rifle raised. Samuel fired first, but missed, his hands shaking from blood loss. The outlaw's return shot went wide, and then Eliza was there, her rifle speaking once, twice. The man fell, and Eliza stood over him, breathing hard, her hands finally steady now that the moment had passed. "Good girl," Samuel whispered, his face pale. "Your mother would be proud." Eliza dropped to his side, her medicine bag already open. The wound in his thigh was serious, bleeding heavily. She worked quickly, packing it with moss and binding it tight, her hands moving with the certainty of her training. "Stay with me, Papa. We're almost through this." Outside, Jakob had maneuvered Rourke into open ground. The two men faced each other across 30 yards of snow, rifles raised, the moment suspended in crystal clarity. "It ends here," Jakob called out, "one way or another." "You think you've won?" Rourke's laugh was bitter. "You've lost everything that mattered, Thornton. Your wife, your daughter, your career. I took it all from you. You took what you could reach, but you couldn't take everything. I found something new, something worth protecting, and that's more than you'll ever understand." They fired simultaneously. Rourke's shot went wide, rushed by anger. Jakob's didn't. Clayton Rourke fell backward into the brook. Snow, blood, spreading across his chest. He tried to rise, couldn't, then lay still. It was over. Jakob stood there for a long moment, staring at the man who'd haunted him for 5 years. Then he turned and walked back toward the cabin, his steps heavy with exhaustion and the weight of what he'd done. Eliza met him at the door. He was bleeding from a graze across his ribs, but he was alive. She pulled him inside, her hands shaking now that the danger had passed. "You're hurt. I'm alive. We're all alive." He looked past her to where Samuel sat, also wounded but conscious. "How bad is he?" "Bad, but survivable. He'll need proper medical care. But he'll live." She turned her attention to Jakob's wound, cleaning and binding it with practiced efficiency. "You took a terrible risk going out there. It was the only way to end it." Jakob caught her hands, stilling them. "It's over, Eliza. Rourke is dead. His gang is broken. We're safe." The words seemed impossible, but when she looked out the window, she saw the proof. Bodies in the snow, silent and still. The mountain quiet again, except for the wind. They'd survived. Against impossible odds, they'd protected their home and each other, and now they had to figure out what came next. The days after the battle passed in a haze of healing and recovery. Eliza tended both wounded men with skill and patience, drawing on everything her mother had taught her. Samuel's wounds were serious but clean, and with rest and proper care, he would recover. Jakob's graze healed quickly, though he moved stiffly for a week after. They buried the outlaws in shallow graves below the cabin, markers of a battle that would become legend in Pine Ridge, but would remain just a memory for those who'd lived through it. Jakob retrieved the wanted posters and evidence from Rourke's possessions, proof of what had happened and why. 2 weeks after the fight, when Samuel was strong enough to travel and the weather had cleared, they made the journey down to Pine Ridge. Jakob drove the wagon with Eliza beside him and Samuel in the back, bundled in blankets. The town was shocked to see them arrive, shocked even more when Jacob presented his marshal's badge and the evidence of what had occurred. The territorial marshal arrived 3 days later, interviewed them all, and officially closed the case on Clayton Rourke. Jacob's actions were ruled self-defense, and the wanted posters for Rourke's gang members were marked deceased. The Pritchards, faced with evidence of their conspiracy, left town in the night, and no one mourned their departure. Doc Brennan took over Samuel's care, giving Eliza a chance to rest. Sarah visited daily, amazed by the transformation in her friend. "You look different," she said one afternoon as they sat in the boarding house parlor. "Stronger, like you finally found where you belong." "I did," Eliza said simply. "I found myself and someone who sees me for who I really am. That changes everything." Mrs. Henderson, the boarding house owner, approached them nervously. "Miss Hartwell, Mrs. Thornton, I wanted to apologize for how we treated you before. We were wrong and unkind, and I'm sorry for my part in it." Other apologies followed, awkward and belated. Eliza accepted them with grace, but without forgetting. These people had shown her their true nature when she'd needed kindness. She would be civil, but she would never again seek their approval. Samuel recovered slowly, but his spirit seemed stronger than his body. One evening, as Eliza sat with him in the doctor's office, he took her hand. "I've been thinking about what comes next for me. I can't go back to the way things were. I don't want to." "What do you want, Papa?" "To be a better man than I've been. To earn back your trust, bit by bit. Doc Brennan says he could use help around here, someone to maintain the office and assist with patients. It's not much, but it's honest work." "I think that's a fine idea," Eliza said, meaning it. "You'll be close enough to visit but far enough to have your own life, and perhaps, in time, we can build something new. Not what we had before, but something better. I'd like that, daughter. I truly would." When the time came to return to the mountain, Jacob presented Samuel with enough money to get settled and a promise to check on him come spring. The two men shook hands, an understanding passing between them that needed no words. They'd fought together, bled together, and survived together. That created a bond that transcended past mistakes. The journey back to the cabin felt different than any trip before it. Eliza sat close to Jacob on the wagon seat, his arm around her shoulders, feeling the rightness of going home. The mountain welcomed them back, with clear skies and gentle snow, and when the cabin came into view, Eliza felt her heart swell. Inside, Jacob built up the fire, while Eliza unpacked their supplies. The cabin bore scars from the battle, bullet holes in the logs and damaged shutters, but it stood strong. They would repair it together, making it even stronger than before. That evening, as they sat by the fire, Jacob pulled a small cloth bundle from his coat pocket. "I made something for you while we were in town. Had the blacksmith help me with it." Eliza unwrapped the cloth to find a simple gold wedding band, warm and gleaming in the firelight. It wasn't fancy or ornate, just a smooth circle of metal that fit her finger perfectly when Jacob slipped it on. "I know we're already married by law and custom," he said, "but I wanted you to have this. A symbol of what we chose, not what circumstance forced on us. I love you, Eliza. You're my wife by choice, by love, by every measure that matters." "I love you too," she said, tears streaming down her face. "You gave me everything I'd stopped hoping for. A home, a purpose, a partner who sees my worth. I choose you, Jacob. Every day, I choose you." They made love that night with a tenderness born of nearly losing each other, every touch a celebration of survival and commitment. Afterward, lying in Jacob's arms, Eliza felt a completeness she'd never imagined possible. "What do you want for our future?" Jacob asked quietly. "Really want, if anything were possible?" "This," Eliza said without hesitation. "This cabin, this mountain, you. Maybe children someday, if we're blessed. A life built on honesty and partnership and love. I don't need wealth or status or the approval of people like those in Pine Ridge. I just need this." Then that's what we'll have. We'll build that life together, one day at a time. Come spring, we'll expand the cabin. Make room for the family we'll create. We'll plant a garden using your mother's knowledge. We'll make this mountain bloom. Tell me about the garden you're imagining, Eliza said, wanting to hear him paint their future in words. So Jacob described the vegetables they'd grow, the herbs they'd cultivate, the broost life they'd build. His voice was low and steady, painting pictures of seasons yet to come, of children learning to read by lamplight and gathering herbs with their mother, of growing old together on this mountain they'd defended with their lives. Eliza listened, watching the fire dance, feeling the weight of the gold ring on her finger. She thought about her mother, who taught her that strength came in many forms and that love was worth any price. She thought about her father, finally finding redemption through honest work. She thought about the town that had rejected her and how their rejection had led her here to this perfect, hard-won happiness. Outside, snow began to fall again, gentle and steady. The mountains settled into winter's grip, but inside the cabin, warmth reigned. Two people who'd been broken separately had found each other and built something whole. A transaction had become a partnership, and a partnership had become love. Sometimes Eliza reflected as sleep began to claim her. The world's cruelty leads us exactly where we need to be. Sometimes what looks like an ending is actually the truest beginning, and sometimes the people who reject us do us the greatest favor of all, pushing us toward the life we were always meant to live. She fell asleep in Jacob's arms, the gold ring warm on her finger, the future bright with possibility. They'd faced the worst together and survived. Whatever came next, they would face that together too, bound not by necessity but by choice, not by convenience but by love that had been tested and proven true. The mountains stood eternal around them, witness to their story. And in the cabin that had become a fortress and then a home, two unlikely souls had found what they'd both stopped believing in. They'd found each other. They'd found themselves. They'd found home. And that was worth more than all the gold that might lie buried beneath the mountain, more than all the approval of all the small-minded towns in the world. What they had was real, hard-won, and theirs forever.